He told me he was thinking about Mrs. Bennett. She's well into her 90s now, he told me. We invited her to Christmas dinner, but she said she finds it hard to get out. It makes me sad to think of her being all alone. Now, I just got my driver's license, and I was always looking for an excuse to drive. So I suggested to my father that I could drive downtown and take Mrs. Bennett a plate of food. My father thought that would be a great idea. So after dinner, Mom made up a plate of turkey with roast potatoes, Brussels sprouts, dressing, and gravy. She put Christmas pudding in a bowl and smothered brandy butter on top of it. She covered everything with foil, and I headed downtown. The streets were deserted as I pulled up in front of Mrs. Bennett's building. Her apartment was in an old 4-story brick building in the seedy part of town. Snowflakes were starting to fall as I walked up the steps into the lobby. What a grand building this must have been when it was built, I thought. I rode the old cage elevator up to her floor and knocked on her door. "Who is it?" she asked, cracking the door and peering out into the dimly lit hall. "Hi, Mrs. Bennett, it's Rolly," I said. "Mom put together a dinner for you." Mrs. Bennett opened the door and smiled. "Come in," she said. "How nice of you to do this. It smells so good." She unwrapped the plate and set it on the table. She lit a couple of candles and told me to sit with her. "Oh, I should be going," I said, and looking for an excuse to leave, I pointed outside. "It's starting to snow." "Please stay until I finish." So I sat down at the table and she poured herself a glass of brandy. I looked around at the emptiness of her place. I'd just come from a house full of Christmas carols and warmth, a tree with lights and waist deep in presents. Suddenly I felt guilty about my motive for coming. "This is delicious," she said. "I haven't seen anyone in a couple of days. Everyone I know is gone now. You have made this Christmas special. Thank you." Mrs. Bennett started telling me stories from her life. I knew at that point I was going to be there for a long time. She told me about the building of the railway and stories of the Wild West. She talked for hours about the old days, about saloons and outlaws and a time that I only knew from the movies. It was well after midnight when I left. I walked into the cold, snowy night and I started my dad's car. I looked up at her apartment as I pulled onto the road, and Mrs. Bennett was at her window waving. I waved too as I drove off into the night, knowing as I left that I would never ever let anyone I know spend Christmas alone. The story came to us from Rolly Haselden of North Saanich, British Columbia.